And welcome back, nerds. Winstreak here. Today we're going to be taking a look at creating a crafting mechanic here. So down on the bottom we have what would be considered our materials. So here we just have them as colors, and when I click on one, it'll put it as my selected item, and then when I click on the anvil, it'll add it to essentially be crafted, and then I can undo that and it'll re-add my values back. If I click on one with nothing in there, it won't select it. And then if I click on the correct materials and mix, it'll craft something for me. And then I have it so if you do a combo that makes nothing, it just tells you failed and you lose the materials. Obviously, you can have it just give the materials back if you want, depending on how your game goes. But I will go ahead and walk us through how to make this completely from scratch. I won't even use pre-made sprites this time. And yeah, first off, we will stop at this page here to credit Shikashi's fantasy icons, and the credit goes to cheekyinkling or Matt Firth. And these are just assets that I use all the time, and I believe I have them open already. Drag them over here. This is what you get when you download it. There is like 250 icons or something on here, and we'll be using those in order to create some of our images. So without further ado, we are in the code now, and the first thing I want to do is have what I would call our inventory. Obviously not going to build a full inventory system, but I need something that is the materials I already own. So we'll have our little fake inventory down here, and that'll hold some sort of materials for us to bring up. So we're going to add a sprite first. And we'll go ahead and pull in the icons. And I just use the transparent one. Sorry about that. Drag them onto our frames here. And we're going to import them as a sprite strip. And that'll allow us to automatically cut them up into their individual images. And I know it's 16 by 20, so I'm good to just type that in. And now we can see it made a bunch of different frames of all the different assets. So I'm going to close this. This is going to become multiple different types of assets for me. So the first one, I'm going to just right click and clone. And we'll rename this one as materials. And inside materials, I'm going to go ahead and delete all the ones that I don't want. And essentially, I just want what would be crafting materials. So we have some wood and iron and gold and other stuff. And we don't need to name them anything special, but we do need to turn the speed down to 0, because once we set it to 1, we want it to stay on that animation frame. And then down here is where they'll all sit. And I'm just going to control drag this, and this will be copy pastes. So now I have 5 different instances of the same materials object. So if I click on materials object here, you see it selects all 5, and I can individually edit them by selecting just any personal one. And the first thing I'm going to do is change each one of these to a different frame. So that'll be 1, be 2, 3, and 4. And they'll also need some variables. So if I click on here, I can select all of them at once, and that will allow me to add a variable to all of them. And let's see, I know I want an amount. That way we can track how many of them I own. And then with that amount, we want to show the user how many they can hold. So we'll create a text box and we'll attach it to them. So I'm going to pull up a new object for text. And I'm just going to put it right down below. And I want to center all this stuff that way. When I center it based off of the origin of our sprite here, it is directly below it instead of off to the side, since the origin on text does not start in the center like it does on sprites. And then we need to attach these, this text and this sprite object. We need to attach them together, and we'll do that with a container. And we'll want to rename this just so we don't confuse later on and end up with 30 different texts. And we'll just do text amount. And now I'm just going to show what happens if we play it. We have this text right here under the log, and then each other material also has a text. They're not as nicely formatted, but you can see that it did create 4 additional text boxes, which on here I don't have. And that's just because the container will automatically create both and destroy both. So that's one of the perks of using a container. And now we just need to go through each one and set the position of it to be directly underneath, and then set the amount to match the amount that the material holds. So we'll do a start of layout. We only need this to happen once. And we want to do for each. That way we make sure we cycle through each one. And we'll do for each material. And we will set the amount to our text here by doing materials.amount. And right now I haven't set any values for all the materials. They should all be at 0, but we can edit that on the layout after we finish making this. And then we just have to set the position. So position, and then that's going to be materials.x, and materials.y plus about 8. You should drop it down below. And then we'll hop back over here. And if I click on a single one, I can edit this and say we have 5 logs and 5 or I don't even know what you call this one. Actually, let me put some different values in there. That way we can tell that they're working correct. And we'll have 0 crystals. So each of these have its own value. And when we run now, all right, we've got to drop it a little lower. Let's see what 15 does. Alrighty, and plus 25 puts it pretty much right below. So that is what we'll hold it with. And we have a value for each one of our materials now. And now I need to be able to interact with these. So when I click on one, I want that to become the selected material that then I have the choice to add to the crafting object that we will make later. So we'll create an area and we'll just label it as, let's go with selected item. I think is what I had in my other one. And we'll create a sprite, and it's just going to be to show where that item is going to end up. I'm going to make it 50, which might be too big, but I don't think it matters too much here. And all right, and now we just have this empty spot, and this is just visual. This is just to show the user what item they actually have selected, and this will be the location that we mark it over to. So we need to add the mouse object. That way we can click on our materials, And then we need to interact with the materials and move them to our selected. Now, let me go ahead and rename sprite to selection zone. And rename this to all assets. And this text is our text selected. Alrighty, so on mouse, on object clicked, and we want it to be a materials object. Yes, Q, this will go up on YouTube later, so you will be able to rewatch as much as you need. I'll also put up the code on itch.io, so you can go into that as well if that helps out. All right, so anytime we click on a material, and we'll just do the most basic route first. No matter what, if we click on it, we want it to show up in this selected item. And the way I'm going to do this is, obviously there's a bunch of different ways you can always do stuff, but I want to do it this way. I'm going to add a new material and just going to duplicate this and then delete it out. Now we have 6 materials and also a 7th material, which is blank. Well, technically, sorry, 0 based. 7 materials and an 8th one. The 8th one is blank. And I'm going to set this to the 8th one. So it's invisible, and I'm just going to reset that to a different frame whenever I need to. So if we click on material, and then to know that we are talking about this selection material, I'm going to go ahead and give this a Boolean. And this is going to start out as true. And then the other ones, we need to start as false. Because only ever this one is selected. And then I'm just going to try to do everything with functions. I'll keep it a little neater. This one will be set selected. So when I click on a material, it's going to know the material that I'm clicking on, but it won't know the secondary material, which is the one I want to be changing, if that makes sense. So I have to run this in 2 different routes. I need to grab the information off of the first material, which I clicked. So all that will be done in this event. And then I want to change the selected one, which will be done in the function. And then any of that crossover data, that'll be sent over as parameters. So we are going to call this function whenever we click on a material. And then we are going to add a parameter for the animation frame. So we know that this has animation frame 0, and this one has 1, and so on. So when we click on this one, we want to send over to that function that we are working with animation frame 0. Or whatever one we click on. So it'll be the materials.animation frame. We send that over as a number. So now we have 0 through 5 or 6, 0 through 5, 4. 0 through 4 will get sent over, and we will hold it in this value. And now inside of here, we're going to do a blank sub event, and we're going to choose material based off that Boolean of selection. So our selected material, which is always this one. And then we bring in the information with animation frame. So now we can set that to set frame to animation frame. So now whatever one I clicked, it puts the material up inside the selected zone. And just as it was a benefit earlier, it is now an annoyance because they are in a container. It's going to bring up that text box and that value. And I don't want that up here because I only want to be loading one item at a time. So I'm just going to hide that. And again, this one's the one we click on. This one's the one that's in the selection. So we'll do that here. We'll just take that text amount and visible and set it to invisible. And then that'll clear out that text up here for us. That was weird. Let's go ahead and run that one more time. So it does automatically start with 1, which we can fix and start a layout. Because this is a material right here, it automatically drops down that text for us. And it has an amount of 5 in there, which I'm going to set to 0 in case we need that later. But up here in our starter layout, I'll add a new one, blank sub event, and then we'll do is selected material. And if it is, we just want to go ahead and set that to invisible. And then I don't believe we need that one anymore. Once it's invisible, it shouldn't re-add visibility, even if we change the frame. So, did I miss? Okay. And at this point, it will bring any of them over to selected. And our next goal will be to block the diamond from going in there because we don't own any diamonds. So we need a check on our left clicks to verify that we have an amount of greater than 0, which should be as simple as it sounds. We'll add a blank sub event and material, and we'll compare a value. And amount is greater than 0. And we only want to call it if that's the case. Otherwise, we just ignore the click altogether. And works like before. And this one does not do anything, which is perfect. So now we have the selected item. And we need to add a crafting area. That way we can put that item into the forge or whatever you want it to be. So under my assets here, I think there's an anvil. Aha. So we want this image. I'm just going to copy this. And then I'll create a new sprite. And just click anywhere to paste it in. And it's super tiny. So we'll use this to shrink down the extra spacing that's not used. And then we can restretch this to 108, multiple of 4. And that's a good size. So this will be our essentially button. If we have a selected item and we click on this, we want it to add that item into our materials that will be forged. And then we need 2 additional buttons, one for submit and one for cancel. And to save time, I'm just going to pull up normal buttons. Normally I would make one out of a sprite, but that takes a little longer. So we got 1 and copy. Now we want to clone 2. So button submit, and I'm going to label it normal buttons. Yep. Button submit and button cancel, or yeah, cancel's fine. And I'll drop these down a bit so I can fit the image of what items will be put into there right above here. So go ahead and change the text. Submit. Cancel. And these buttons don't really do anything until we have our items over here. And I believe I just have essentially a holder slot for all of them. We'll do 30 by 30. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the route I'm going for this, 9 is the most that you want to do. And I'll get into why later. But obviously, there's a bunch of different ways you can build how things interact. And to make things easier, I'm just using a 10-base number system to figure out what value of items you get. So if you have more than 9 items you can use, it gets messy. So these will just be material slots. And they need to hold a Boolean for full. And just like with my inventory videos, we have these as false on whether or not they're filled. Once I send an item over, I set it to full. That way it no longer uses that one. And then once I set it, or once I remove an item from it, I just remove it from full, and then it's usable again. So that'll be the switch to toggle between whether or not it's usable. And then I'm pretty sure these will automatically be lowest to highest. But just to make sure, I just build my own ID system. And then 0, 1, and so on, all the way up by 1 each time. Oops. And that way I can pick by lowest value here, and that makes sure I grab the leftmost one that is not full. So now when we click on this sprite, which we need to rename as, let's go with Forge. Now, whenever we click on the Forge, I want this selected item to go in the leftmost material slot. So that'll be our next little piece of code here. And we're going to add a function for that. Move to Forge. And then mouse on click for an object. So just like we did with this one, we'll have the on click event that will end up calling the function. So we'll have on click on the Forge. And then this will want to take in the information from this item, because our selected one will always be this item. So we can just copy paste this material as selected material. And then we'll want to send over some information. So we need a parameter. And for that, I think we just need the frame number. So animation frame. And then we need to find the inventory slot, or the material slot. Oops. Add a blank sub event here. And compare by lowest. So we want the leftmost lowest ID. And we also need it to be Boolean set to false, which doesn't exist. So we'll put full and invert it. So it cannot be full. And we'll just create a new one here. Under system, create object, and we will add the material. And we want that on our material slot.x, mat slot.y. So create it right above the one that we have marked. And then we need to set that to full. And of course, we need to actually call the function on the click. So move to forge, and we'll go ahead and give it that materials. Oops, we've got a new thing in there. Materials dot animation frame. And I believe that's right. So let's go ahead and give it a check. Well, we got one. So it seems to only be looking at the first material slot that meets the requirements. So we're just going to add for each to this. For each material slot, where the instance ID is the lowest. Hey there, OHefe. And blank sub event. I believe this is what we want to do. So now we're just looking at ones that aren't full. And we're looking at all of them, and then we're going to pick the lowest one out of all of them. So this should be able to go more than once. Oh, nope, that autofills all of them. So it is now working, and I just never set the frame based off the animation frame here. So material. Oh, well, thank you very much. And set frame. And that's going to be animation frame, which is what we sent in from the selection. And now, cool. Now we can send in any of them other than the one we have 0 of. So we'll need to clear this text. And then I also don't want these to be treated like my clickable materials down here in my inventory spot. So I'm going to give them a Boolean to essentially show that anything that ends up in here can't be treated the same as these. So we're going to do that with giving materials a Boolean. And I'm going to set that Boolean to usable and true. All right, so all of them are true right now. And I don't think I want this one to be. And now when I create these new ones, I'm also going to set those to not be true. We're going to set Boolean usable to false. And they'll be at the same time here. So when I create them in these, I'm going to automatically set them to no longer usable. And then I'm just going to verify when I click on these in my earlier one that they are usable. So on left click on materials up here, material amount is more than 0 and material is usable. And now We can put that up here. And then we can put this one up here. But then when I click on these, it no longer moves them over to my selected. So that's all done. And then we just have to hide the text box that pops up because of the containers, which is as simple as text amount. And we'll set those to invisible as they're created. And just to verify it works, boop. Okay, it's up there and has no extra text box and allows us to do it with any of the ones we're supposed to do. Next, I want to remove the selected item once I submit it in here, because as of now, I move. Actually, we'll do it this way. Every time I add one in here, we'll subtract the value. And then if it gets to 0 or lower, then we'll remove it. That way you can add multiple at a time by just clicking, but not if it brings you down below 0. So that'll be under move to forge. We don't want to subtract them when we move them to selected, because just because they're in selected doesn't mean we need to use them. So we want to do that inside the move to the forge. And so the information we have in this is just the animation frame of our material, which is enough to kind of search through all these for that animation frame and subtract 1 from the amount. So we will create a new sub event here. And we'll do for each material. And this material has to be one of our usable materials. And it shouldn't have the requirement in here to have more than 1 for the amount. We'll do that elsewhere. But from here, we will go ahead and subtract 1 from amount. So now we end up clicking on our forge. It takes this material, gives us the animation frame, and then down here we need to make sure we're matching that animation frame is equal to animation frame. So down here we will search through all of our materials from our inventory. Whatever one matches this animation frame, which is the one on selected materials, as long as it's usable, meaning it's not up top. And these, it's only out of my inventory ones. We will subtract 1 from the amount. So we'll go ahead and see if that worked. Move it over there, and we won't know because I need to update the text. Text amount. We will reset that to materials.amount. Oh my. And here we go. We got a selected item, put it up there, and we went from 5 down to 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And obviously we can keep going, which we need to now force the selected material to no longer be here if we run out of that material. Which we can do in here since we already have the material that we're working with selected. Do a blank sub event and compare amount. Compare value. And we'll do equal to or less than 0. And I'm going to copy this where we set our selected and add that in here. And we're going to set that to the blank frame, which I think was 5, but I will verify. So this is playing frame 7. Oops. So if we ever get to an amount of 0 or less, it should set that selected item back to frame 0, which will be a blank item. And then when we try to continue pushing things into the forge, it'll no longer have the animation for whatever one we were working with. It'll be for a blank one, and we'll verify that that works. So we go all the way down to 0, and now that's gone. I'm going to click it again and then add another one. And now we added a blank one into our 6th spot here. So we need to find a way to make sure that we only move selected if it is not equal to 7. And so up here where we actually call move to forge, up here where we call move to forge, we can do a check to make sure that the material that we're sending over is not animation frame 7, which means it's not a blank. So hopefully that stops that from happening. Good, that still works. Put that in, and now there's nothing. Put extra ones in, but it no longer takes spots from us. So there we go. Now we can fully fill up our bar here with, I believe, no more errors. And next we need to be able to cancel and submit those values. So cancel, we'll do a function. And cancel is going to need to clear all of these material slots, which means set them back to not full, as well as remove the or delete the image on top of them. And then it will also have to replenish the amounts that have been lost, because each material in there is -1 from the amount. So we need to re-add those. So add the event for on button click. And we'll call that function cancel. And for each one of those material slots, actually for each, and we only care about them if they are full, because that means they have an item. Because we're going to be deleting sprites based off of how close they are to the material slot. We don't want to be messing with ones that are empty, because then the closest item could be our actual materials in our inventory. And we only want to delete the ones that are in the forge. So for each material slot is boolean full. And then I will do another blank sub event for nearest. You can also do, actually, overlapping is probably a little safer. I'm going to go back and material slot is overlapping material. So we find each one of our full materials, and then those materials that are overlapping need to go ahead and delete that object or destroy. But then I also need to go through and get all the values to return them. So before we destroy, because once they're destroyed, construct just forgets that the object exists instantly. So before they're destroyed, we need to go ahead and send those values back. Which check something in my other code. All right, and looks like I just did it with a function, and we'll call that add amount. And every time we call this, we want to just add the value of the animation frame that we are destroying up here. So we'll call it up here, which we'll call it for everyone that's full. And from there, we will submit the frame name and then just add 1 to the amount each time. So call function, add to amount, and then we need to take in the parameter animation frame. And actually, we need to call it down here, still above destroy though. But up here, we don't talk about a materials at all. So it wouldn't know which material to send the animation frame from until we actually call one on the left side of the events there. So materials.animation frame. And then in here, we just need to add one to whatever material has that animation frame. And we only want to affect the ones that are the inventory items, so our usable ones. And then we'll just add 1 to their amount. So material, add to amount 1. So that should be for each material we're adding for each material slot that was full. So we can go ahead and test that. And I'll throw a few of those in. So this should go up to 5, 6, 2, and 1. And we'll go ahead and cancel those. And got to set the text. Oops. I hit too many buttons. Let me pull that up. Alrighty. So not sure whether or not it worked because we did not reset the text, which we've done a few times, and I'm just going to copy paste it. Text right here. So for each one that we change the amount, we want to re-update that text. So we'll try that again with the same numbers. And again, this should go up to 5, 6, 2, and 1. And we'll cancel those 5, 6, 2, and 1. So we got our correct values back. And now if I add more, nothing happens. And that's because we never set these to be empty again. So it's trying to add to ones later on, and there aren't any. So on whatever ones I'm destroying the material, I also need to set that slot to be empty again, which is easy enough. And I don't think it matters, but I like to put everything above the destroy. And we'll run a quick test. Make sure we fill it up all the way, cancel it, and then we can refill it up from the left to the right again. All right, now we need submit to take the items in here and use them if usable. So here's where I had only 9. Essentially, I give each of these materials a value. So wood is going to have a value of 1. And then this ore will have a value of 10. So if I put 9 pieces of wood in here, the total value is going to be 9. If I put 1 piece of ore and 8, and the rest are wood, then we'll end up with 18. And based off those values, we can figure out exactly what combination was put in there. And it doesn't matter the order. And then if that value matches one of our codes, then it will create that item. So let's see, we will start out with a button on click. I'm going to copy paste this one and drag it down to the bottom. I'm glad that makes sense. I feel like I talk in circles when I try to explain myself. But we'll do a button on submit, button clicked on submit, and obviously I need a new function. Oops, wrong button. Add function, and we'll just call that forge. And we will change that function call to forge. So when we click on submit, we will call this function. And it's kind of going to work the same way. We're going to go through each spot and erase those items. We no longer want to, oops, that's not drag. We no longer want to refill these with the amounts. We want the amounts to go away, but we do want to grab the amounts of each one of these. That way we can figure out if it matches one of our codes. So I'll go ahead and just copy paste this to save a little bit of time. And then I have to drag it over so it's inside of my forge function. And I'm just going to erase all of those. But we want to still find each material that's overlapping a full one. And I'm going to add the new instance variable for all of my materials. And that'll be forge value. And all right, so this one's 1. This one is 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000. So when we go through each one and delete them, we want to grab a value. So we're going to add a local variable, total forge value, and this will just add up each one of our items before we delete them and give us the total that we have. So for each is full is overlapping materials, we're going to add to our total forge value, and we want to add that materials dot value. Materials dot, what I name it, forge value? Yeah, forge value. So this will go through, delete each one, and add that number. And that'll just be our testing value right there. I don't want to be inside of that loop. Blank sub event. Once this is all done, I want to just set that text for our test. So now I should be able to put one piece of wood in here and submit it, and we get a value of 1. And now we should get 31 for this, which is 4. So that didn't work right. So first things first, we can check all of our materials. We have forge value of 1, forge of 10. So these are holding the correct values. Let's go over here. And now I have a new selected, which has a forge value of 0. So that's where we lose our value. When we move it over to selected, it no longer holds our forge value. Which, hey there, Trouble. How you doing? And that's going to be fixable up in our set selected. So now instead of just sending the animation frame, we also want to send the forge value. And we just do that with materials.forge value. And then we will set the new item's forge value. I'm doing good. Thank you for asking. And we set the new one to the value we sent in. And we probably have to do that again when we move it to the animation frame. Sorry, when we move it to the Forge inventories, which will be done right here. And actually, I should be able to just copy paste this. Cool, Forge value. And now when we click on this, we need to send in materials.forge value. Oops. Value, forge value to forge value. All right, we'll go into debug again, just verify those are holding the correct values. And it was any ones that weren't the one values that were messed up. So we have our newest value up there. I got it highlighted, scroll down, and forge value 10. So now it looks like we have the correct values on our new items. And I can submit these and I should have 110. And we do. So that is all working correctly. I'm going to delete our text testing, which keeps the object over here. I can reuse it if we need it again later, which we should not because we are just about done. Now we just need to go ahead and copy these. So the difference between canceling and forging is we grab that value and we don't add the items back. So this one adds the items back and this one has the value. And the other part should be the exact same. So we want to reset those materials to no longer be full. And we also want to destroy the materials because they're gone. And at this point, instead of setting this text to a value, we want to call a function with that value. And that function will be create item. Oops. And that's going to obviously take in a parameter, which will be total forge value. No point to change the name. And we can erase that one and set the function to forge total forge value. Create item. Sorry, not forge. Create item. And that's going to send the total forge value item that it calculated into our new function here. In here, we will just have all of our combinations that we want to create new items. So blank sub event, it's just going to be a bunch of if else statements, nothing pretty. Compare values is equal to, let's say, 12. One for 15 and one for 111. And obviously you can do this with any combination that is reachable. And then we create that item. I don't have an inventory again, so I'm just gonna kind of throw the item onto the side here and it'll be based off of these. And I'm gonna rename this to created items. We'll open that up, set that speed down to 0 so it doesn't loop through. And go ahead and delete the stuff I don't need at all. That's funny. Go ahead and get rid of all that. And I'm going to change the size. Double it. And I want to keep this here. That way it remembers the properties that I did. But I don't want it to exist during my game. So way up here on my starter layout, I'm just going to go ahead and destroy this. And that'll remember any properties that I set for new ones that I create, but it'll get rid of this so it'll no longer be in my game. And then when we roll those, we can go ahead and call that creation. And I just want to be kind of down here. So in like the 460 to 780 range. Create object, created items, random, 460 to 780, I think I said. And then the height will be like 550. Oh, looking at the wrong one. 250 to 420. And then we will set the animation frame. This one is 0. Oops. Animation frame 0. So this will be in all of them, and this will be in all of them, but with a different frame. And I'm going to copy paste this last one and add a bunch of else's. Obviously, the first one doesn't get an else. So if it's equal to 12, it'll do this. Else, if it's equal to exactly 15, this. Else 111 will do this. If it doesn't meet any of these requirements, it'll do this last one. And this is where you put in your failure code, whatever you want it to do. And then the important ones are the actual creations. And we can go ahead and test and see if that works. So 11 should do the hatchet, I think it was. Nope. Well, that's sad. Oh, 12. Derp. 1, 2, and 10. All right, makes the pickaxe. And then the other value was 15, which I can't make anymore. 15 takes all of them and one of those. And that creates the hatchet. And then 111 will create, I don't even remember what it was, but we got 111. Creates a wooden sword. And then any other combo creates nothing. My other video just had the fail pop up, which I just did with text and a fade, which would go right there. But otherwise, that should cover everything. And since I got a few of you on there, if you had any questions, you can let me know now. Otherwise, anyone else, let me know in the comments below, and I'll be happy to help you all out. And this one also added particles. So up here, I threw an X and a Y value holder as local variables. And instead of doing the random inside of my create object, I do it at the start of my craft function. That way I can reuse them. So I create both the particles and the crafted item at the same spot. And it just goes ahead and gives you that cool little blast effect of particles. But yeah, all right. Well, that does it. You all have a great day, great night, and peace.